Let's begin today with a question. And you may have heard this question before, and so maybe you're ready to answer it. But it goes something like this, all right? If you could be anyone in history, anyone in the whole world, whose life would you like to live? Whose life would you like to live? Mozart? Leonardo? Confucius? You got to remember, Confucius died poor. Okay? Died poor, and at the time he died, they rejected his teaching. Florence Nightingale? Alexander the Great? Christopher Columbus? Queen Victoria? Okay, all right. I chose these people very carefully. And say you choose somebody, well, the follow-up would be this. Why did you choose that person, right? And hopefully you would say, this was a great humanitarian, this was a great builder, this was a great peacemaker, this was a great philosopher and teacher, and you would know why. His contribution, and you would make your choice based more than on superficialities. And so, if you think about it, what kind of criterion would you use in your life? Because, this second question is far more helpful than the first question. The first question just kind of gets us thinking and gets us rolling. But often, when a child is asked the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? We get these kind of superficial answers. I remember when I was a youngster, either preschool or afterwards. You know what I wanted to be when I grew up? I want to be, somebody say lawyer? Last thing I want to be a newspaper reporter. You know why? Because Clark Kent, a.k.a. Superman, was a newspaper reporter, right? That's pretty superficial. So anyway, we ask these questions, and we don't get past that. Now, when you become a teenager, the same question comes back. But it comes back with a vengeance, and it comes back with pressure. Because depending on how you answer that question, it very likely leads you to choose a particular college. Not just a university, but the particular college because of the particular department. And that might lead you across the country, far away. It may cost you a lot to go to a particular university. And by where you go to school, it affects the kind of roommates that you are going to get, right? And so all of these things impact, and they will affect us. They will change us. And so this is a very important question that our teens face. And they don't get away from it, because when they get to that point where they're graduating from college and they're sitting there with a commencement speaker, what's the typical bottom line that the current commencement speakers are telling our college graduates? That says, don't just take a job, follow your what? Your dreams and your passion, right? And hey, for most of us, the big dream is, I want to get out of this robe and go to a nice theater where it's nice and cool, okay? Most of us don't know that early in our lives what our passions might be. In fact, I find that most people don't know their passions until they've lived a life. And so to pursue our passion like the commencement speaker only makes it harder and more unrealistic. You've heard of the city El Dorado? How the explorers in olden days were looking for the El Dorado, and it was a mythical city, the city that was made of gold. Well, following that passion, some of us will never have a passion to follow. Some of us, our dream is a bigger screen TV. Okay? That's about the size of it. And so it gets very unrealistic, but it puts pressure on us because we think everybody else is doing it. Like I said, this question doesn't go away. It's like gum on the bottom of your shoe, all right? It always seems to stay on. So here I am. I'm entering my third stage of life. That's what they call it, the third stage of life. And you know, AARP, the American Association of Retired People, they're telling me, now's your chance to live your dream, to obey your passion. Here it is again. And once again, I'm facing this thing. So as I prepare for retirement, I've been asking all my previously retired friends, and most of my friends have already retired, so, you know, they've got a head start. So what are you doing? You want to tell me? Oh, nothing much. Okay? So they're not listening to AARP or the rest of these people who say we should be following our passion. Well, today, this morning, I've got an answer for all of us, okay, about following our dreams, our passion, what we're going to be when we grow up. And this answer applies not just to this life, but beyond into the next life, the one that's going to last a lot longer than 100 years. Okay, so it's going to be very valuable. This is good news, and today's passage talks about it over and over. And so we're going to look at 1 John 2:28 to 3:3, and I'm going to try to read it for you in a way that makes it easier to understand. And so I want you to just follow along, all right? So we're going to go from 28 to chapter 3, verse 3, Andy. Okay, so let's begin. And now, little children, abide in him, so that when he appears, we may have confidence and not shrink from him in shame at his coming. Verse 29, if you know that he is righteous, you may be sure that everyone who practices righteousness has been born of him. 3:1, see what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God, and so we are. The reason why the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Beloved, verse 2, beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. And verse 3, and everyone who thus hopes in him purifies himself as he is pure. So as you have heard the reading and as you have watched the words, what is it that we are going to be when we grow up? What is the answer? Flicker of light here? What is it we're going to be? It's repeated 3 times in this passage. 2 explicitly and 1 implied. Children of God. We are going to be the children of God. And it says, and so we are. And then in verse 2, beloved, we are God's children now, even now. And as we talk about this passage as it's used, okay, let me give a couple of clarifications. We're not talking about the fact that all humanity, because God is God and he's the creator, is considered children of God. Okay? Here we're getting a technical usage of the term children of God. It's not talking about the angels. There's one verse in Job chapter 1 where it talks about the angels also being called the sons of God. All right? And we're not talking about the nation of Israel, which sometimes is called the son of God. But here, like I said, it's a very specialized use, and the theologians use the term spiritual sonship. Okay? Spiritual sonship. And again, to clarify, when we say sonship, it has nothing to do with gender. Okay? Sonship is a generic and kind of a legal term. Because what happened was, back in the olden days, only the males could inherit. The women could not. And so when Paul used the word sons to talk about God's children, he uses son because we, guys, girls, all alike, will inherit from God. Okay? And he talks about it in terms of adoption. And back in those days, you didn't adopt women. So the Romans were very much like the Chinese. Okay? Adopt them in. And so, again, that's not because of gender. And so Paul used the word huios. Okay? Who? We, us. Huios. Say that Greek word. Okay. John doesn't use that word. He uses the word teknon. Teknon means children, whereas huios means son. Okay? So say the word teknon. All right? Say this after me. I am not a techie. I am a teknon. Okay, that's to help you remember the word. All right? Teknon. So we're talking about teknon, the spiritual sonship. And so this is how John does it. And as we wrote in our explanation of today's call to worship, because John takes one metaphor. He says, you're born again, born from above, born of God. But then he takes you all the way to being sons and children, and then he takes you into the eternal home. And so he is very consistent in his use of this. So anyway, this is what we're talking about, and this is the topic. And I'm going to now ask us to look at the passage very carefully in some more detail. We're going to go back over verse by verse. I'm thinking that because of the wide age range in our English congregation, this might be the easiest way for everybody to follow and really come to appreciate the passage and what God is saying, rather than just listening to a sermon. You're getting a sermon, but the focus will be very much on understanding the word, so that when you walk away, you can come back and you says, I get it. You see. So anyway, we're going to come to verse 28, and so let's turn to that now. All right? And again, we're going to break it in little parts. So it starts off by saying, and now little children, and John always called his flock little children, abide in him, meaning Jesus. So he's going all the way back to John 15, when Jesus told them that he was the vine and they were the branches, and what they needed to do to have life and fruitfulness was to abide in him. And so John is reminding him, but he adds a special urgency when he reminds them. He says, so that when he, and who is the he? Jesus. Okay? When he appears, we may have confidence and not shrink from him in shame at his coming. And you remember when Jesus was alive, he told various stories about a head of an estate going off to receive some award, some honor, some privilege, some status, and he would tell the leaders of his household to take care of various things, and he would entrust them with money and whatever for investment. And the problem was that when he came back, some would be faithful and some might not be faithful. And those who were not faithful were not happy to see his return. They were not happy. And in fact, they were downright afraid and feeling ashamed. And the best example of this verse would be the prodigal son. Because he was even worse. He took the father's money, he took it early and made him ruin his capital, his corpus, and he took it and he blew it, okay, with a capital B, and then he realizes, I've got nowhere to turn. And he comes back and he feels, what? Ashamed. And he tells his father, I am not worthy to be called your sons. Let me just be a servant. And so this is what that verse is talking about. So after John begins by warning his congregation and encouraging them, he tells them what kind of a lifestyle should be evident in their lives so that they will not be ashamed, but they will have confidence. Verse 29. It says, you know that he is righteous. You may be sure that everyone who practices righteousness has been born of him. And he's basically saying, if you're really born again, then you're going to be naturally like Jesus in his righteousness. And this will be your indication that you have a sense of family culture, family values, and family likeness, and this is a part of you inwardly. So he tells them that this is how they are to be. Now we come to chapter 3, verse 1. And it says, see what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God, and so we are. And I love the fact of Mark, when he read this verse, he put all of his reading oomph into it, okay, which is a good advertising for his book because he has it in audio version. So he puts the same kind of oomph in it. It's going to be fun to listen to, all right? And basically, in the Greek, this is what comes out. John, in the Greek, is suddenly very excited. He says, take a moment, people, and marvel at the significance of our new birth. And he follows that with the phrase, what kind of love? And it's not a question. In the Greek, what kind of is equivalent to this very wonderful American expression. You may have heard of it. It goes like this. Man, oh man, oh man, oh man. You heard that one? Yeah, it's a great one. Man, oh man, oh man, oh man. Like, this is incredible. And so he comes to this point and he's just astounded at God's love, at this extravagant act of God bringing us into his family and into his household. Now, men, guys, we should love this. Guys love what I call the grand gesture. For years, you've forgotten your wife's birthday. For years, you have forgotten the anniversary. For years, you've come home late and you didn't call. For years, you've eaten the food and you never said thank you or this is great. But you know what? You're going to make up for it. In one grand gesture, you're going to take her to Hawaii or Paris or wherever and give her the vacation of her life, right? The one grand, stupendous gesture. And speaking on behalf of all women, it ain't going to do it. Okay? But that's the way we are. Remember Kobe Bryant? When he got in trouble in Denver with a hotel worker, not of his gender, and he had to come home and face his wife, what did he buy her? 8 carats. Like, give me a splint so I can keep my finger up. $4 million worth of diamond. A grand gesture That's a lot of I'm sorries. This isn't for God just a grand gesture. He means it. You know, we can get adopted into a family. And a couple of weeks ago, I was telling you about Mr. Tam, who we baptized, and he was sold by his Chinese family without any previous notice, suddenly in the marketplace, to a family that didn't have a son. And he went into that household as a stepson. And you know from all the nursery stories that that's not a good thing. You get treated badly. You're second class and often abused. Cinderella, right? Stepsister, stepdaughter. This is no grand gesture. But you know, we Christians failing to appreciate our spiritual sonship, and we reduce salvation to its barest minimum. My sins are forgiven. And then what do? We go out and commit more sins because we still have the sin nature. Or we reduce it down to, I don't have to go to hell. Whew. Okay? Some people don't even get that far. Some people, you know, their relatives or their neighbor is badgering them and saying, you need to become a Christian. And they finally say, what? Okay, I'm going to go through the motions to get you off my back. And then they think, because of what their friend said, that if you say a certain type of prayer, that they are Christians. And so our whole sense of being a Christian is reduced down to nothing more than the action of saying a prayer mechanically. And who wouldn't? I mean, what a great insurance policy. I didn't have to pay a cent. You know, I didn't even have to read any fine print. The prayer is so simple. So it's like how we buy warranties for electronics and unused gym memberships. And it's all negative. And we don't appreciate it. And so John doesn't talk about these things. He talks about the fact that we become the children of God. And when I read this expression from my college days comes to my mind. It's blowing my mind. You know, it's that fantastic, it blows your mind. And so for me, this has always been one of my very favorite verses and one of my very favorite topics. Mind-blowing. To be born of him, a child of the King. You know, there's a passage in the New Testament. It goes like this. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no mind has imagined what God has prepared for those who love him. God's got some mind-blowing stuff ahead for us. And this is one that we begin to experience right now. And that's pretty good. And what it is to me is it's unimaginable grace, because this is totally unnecessary to our salvation. You know, totally unnecessary. If God forgave me and he saved a little patch of Eden for me to take care of, maybe next to Tom so I can pick his fruit, okay? But he just gave me a little piece of Eden, I would be perfectly happy on earth. And a lot of Christians do feel that way. But to make us part of the family, that is just way too much. And then John starts to give us some clarification. We're going to look at verse 2 and verse 3. And it begins with this. Beloved, we are God's children. When? Now. Okay? No more follow-up activities. I forget how long they waited. It made me wait after I passed my bar exam before I could go be sworn in. Or how long I had to wait after I got naturalized or I passed the naturalization test before I was sworn in. He says there's no waiting period because you have the Holy Spirit as a seal and proof. But it says this. It says the problem is we're not sure what that means. Okay? So the verse continues. And what we will be we're still on verse 2. What we will be has not yet appeared. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him because we shall see him as he is. I'm going to ask some of the young girls in our congregation. Okay? When you guys were young, did you play dress up? Yes? No? Well, it seems to be very common, right? They get into their mom's shoes. My daughter likes to try to put on my watch. Okay? They put on their mom's clothes. The little boys will put on the dad's tie and hang it over. They want to, what? Be like the parent. They want to grow up. But they have no idea what they look like and what it really means. So they do it in a very superficial way. Okay? We're kind of like that stage. Well, we don't really know how glorious we're going to be when we see Jesus. But we begin to try to get into it. And John says, because we shall see him as he is. And then the next verse, verse 3. And so everyone who thus hopes in him, in God, purifies himself as he is pure. And so going back to verse 2, it says, and these are wonderful, wonderful words, okay? We shall be like him. So one day, 2 little boys get to see daddy at work. So mom takes the 2 little boys to where dad works. Except this dad works in a football stadium. And so this Sunday, they are there. And they're watching their dad. And their dad is the quarterback. And so he's back there, Hall of Fame quarterback, and he's got all the crowds cheering, and he's doing a great job. And the boys come home in awe of their dad. And they think, wow, I'd like to be like that. And so little Peyton and little Eli are motivated to be like their daddy, Archie, quarterback of the New Orleans Saints. And they grow up. And pretty soon, they become Hall of Fame quarterbacks. See, John is presenting a picture to them. And he says, you don't understand it clearly, but we want you to aspire so that someday you will be like him. Not in superficial ways, but in the very best ways possible. And this passage gives us 2 things that we are focusing in on. Earlier, it talked about being righteous. And here, it talks about in verse 3, purifying ourselves. Paul says the same thing. He says, put off the old man, okay? So this is my old jacket, and you get rid of it, and then you put on the new man, and you put that on. And so John here is saying, negatively, purify yourself. Positively, develop righteousness. Because you know what? You can't get rid of old bad habits just cold turkey. The easier and better way is to develop better, positive habits and lifestyle. And so he says, do this and you will do well. You will move on to great glory. And so I want us to jump all the way to Revelation 21:7. And this is at the very end, next to the last chapter of the Bible. All right, it's already up. And this is what it says about those who want to be spiritual children, who want to fulfill our spiritual sonship. We need to conquer. It says the one who conquers will have this heritage. You see, we will inherit, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. And so this is our hope. This is the mind-blowing possibility that is ahead for us. And now it's up to us to move in that direction and to start to develop that family likeness. And I want to get real practical with us. All right? So, 2 points. First of all, find something practical to do, something that needs to be changed. Okay? Something that is practical, that will affect the people around us who are closest to us, the kind of stuff that happens over and over again. And then as you overcome this thing, then you will gain momentum to do other things. I remember the second time I lost a lot of weight and ended up running 4 marathons. My friend, another pastor, says, "You should drink this drink, Ken." So I bought it because my friend kept pushing me. And I drank it. Immediately, I lost 2 or 3 pounds. Yeah. I thought, wow, this could work. So I drank some more of it, but I eventually did the right stuff, which is the exercise, and kind of changed my eating habits. But it gave me the momentum to get moving, because initial inertia takes more force than what? Continuation, right? So I still remember that much of my physics. So when you find something that's doable, here's the verse that talks about the process, 2 Corinthians 3:18. So all of us who have had that veil removed can see, and we will reflect the glory of God. And the Lord, who is the Spirit, makes us more and more like him as we are changed into his glorious image. All right, I'm reading from the New Living Translation, which is a little easier to get. Okay? So the Lord, who is the Spirit, makes us more and more like him as we are changed into his glorious image. So we move from glory to glory, improvement to improvement, change to change, transformation to transformation. Give you some examples of the kind of stuff that we can work on. Like I said, choose the kind of thing that happens over and over and come up regularly, because they impact people close to us in our lives. People like a boss, somebody you supervise, a coworker, a sibling, a teacher, a spouse, a best pal. Choose easy things, like I'm very volatile. I get angry very easily. Or I have a tendency to always think me first. Me first in the potluck line. Me first to grab the remote control. You know, the tendency to always be me first. Or I struggle to keep my promises. Okay? Keeping promises is very important. Or I tend to leave a mess for others. You have a problem leaving mess for others to clean up? Taking all the credit. We all know coworkers who are like that, or siblings who are like that. They hog all the credit. We tend to be hurtful. We tend to say little things that kind of, get under people's skin. And so you take these things and you replace it with something good. I bet you some of you thought I was going to suggest doing religious things. Right? Pray more, attend church more, read more of the Bible. I'm not excluding those things. Okay? But I'm saying the things that really impact people around us in life. Because let's face it, Jesus was not just religious. He was a beautiful, beautiful person. Kids would run to him. I imagine dogs would come and want to lick his hand. Beautiful person. That's part of the family likeness. And that's the kind of thing we don't think about enough in our lives. You would not become just as he is by being religious. But if we become beautiful people, more tolerant, more loving, more patient, more forgiving, then we're making progress in moving from glory to glory, and we will become those who resemble the sons of God. Tell you a story about a man. He's your uncle, and he's at home, living in a very comfortable home. And somebody breaks in, a homeless person, looking for something to steal. And as this homeless person breaks into your house, he encounters the son. And the son is unafraid, and he's discerning. And he says to the man, "You need some food? I can give you some food. I can even give you a little cash." And the person is scared, frightened, and accidentally shoots the young man in fear, perhaps somewhat in rage. And you know what? The young man dies. So they load him on to an ambulance. And fortunately, the ambulance gets there soon enough, and he's revived after he dies. But before he had died, the young man said, "Father, he didn't understand. He didn't mean it. It's okay." Well, the young man comes out of the hospital, and he comes home. And this is what his dad says to him. He says, "Son, I heard what you said. I understood what you said. So what I did was I took this homeless man, I bailed him out. I have given him a new set of clothes. I'm developing his work skills, and I'm helping him to find a job. And you know what? I've asked him to live here with us." Now, at this point, does your mind say, "That's too much"? What about if the man says to his son, "And guess what, son? I'm going to adopt him. And we're going to make him part of the family to show that, our forgiveness, our acceptance is 1,000% authentic, the real thing. We're making a total commitment here." And when you hear the words, "We're going to adopt him," is this the point where you say, "Oh no, this is too much. You really don't need to do this"? That's our human nature. But see, this is exactly what God did for us. Too much. And yet here it is. And no wonder John says, "Man, oh man, oh man, oh man." That's in the Greek. And then he says, "This blows my mind." You see, don't take your salvation at such a superficial level. There is so much glory to the fullness of our salvation, so much stuff that we could not have imagined in our wildest dreams. And so that's why I'm so glad John brings this up. But let's start moving toward becoming like the sons of God, like the children of God, and start letting that family likeness start to appear in our day-to-day lives with the people whom we rub shoulders with the most. Let's pray. Father, thank you. Open our eyes, capture our hearts and our imagination, and give us the thrill of understanding the height and depth and breadth and width of your great love. We pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.